Hello, humans, and welcome to another episode of Gen X Gamer Mutahar. You're gonna get milked like the cow you are. Another video for you. I'm waiting for a tool here. I just finished doing a fuel injector change, which has been an actual nightmare for my daughter's car. And now I have to take off the catalytic converter. And let me tell you, it's a nightmare. I need a special tool to do it. But you know what? I'm not a mechanic. I have no training, right? I'm just trying to save her a few bucks. So I'm going to do the best I can, but I would never call myself a mechanic, just like Mutahar should not ever call himself an engineer without a degree, because this is what happens. He's in the situation that he's in. But today we're going to talk about why he did it, right? Why did he do it? And why isn't success enough? Why isn't it enough? I mean, why isn't being a millionaire enough? Why isn't his talent as a video creator enough to where you have to lie about being, so-called engineer of different types, or, whatever he's claiming. It doesn't matter at this point, right? It's been over 10 years of the same thing. So today we're going to analyze why isn't success enough, right? What's the psychology behind, educational credential lies? And let me tell you what, guys, it comes from high pressure families, right? Hispanics are very different. Let me tell you something about myself. I didn't get my degree until I was in my 40s. I didn't get my education until I was in my 40s, right? I was a very late bloomer. But when I didn't have a college degree, there was no pressure from my family, from other family members, on who got a degree or not, and I have an uncle who's a cardiologist. My cousins are doctors, but we don't view each other in those terms. We just don't. When I graduated, I didn't get the regular congratulations like most people would, in other in other ethnic groups. For us Hispanics, we're natural born haters. I was walking down, and they're like, you think you're all bad now wearing that gown? You think you're all that? Yeah, you think you're all bad? Those are the kind of praise that I got, right? They'll remind you of the worst things that you ever did. Remember that one time you were drunk in the bathtub? Now you think you're all bad. That's the sort of praise we have. So we really don't have, at least, growing up in East Los Angeles and surrounding areas, we never had that kind of pressure. I want to say probably like a third of the cousins of my generation had a degree. The rest, we didn't. But there was no pressure from parent to parent on getting a degree, right? But that's very different of how, for example, Asian cultures see it, whether it's China, India. There's a real high pressure there, right? And there's a burden, right? There's a real burden of legacy for this man when his dad is a doctor and his mom a microbiologist. They say the apple doesn't fall from the tree, but in this case, it rolled down the hill and went to the sewer. If you value education, right? If you have a son that dropped out of college, and I think that is the problem here, because Mutahar, he comes from a high achieving family. Again, his father a doctor, his mom a microbiologist, according to what he said. But at this point, is that true? Who the hell knows? Probably so. Because these are, those in particular, they're not simply professionals. They're cultural status symbols. In many Indian households, let me tell you, all the Indian acquaintances that I have, and I can't say that they're friends, but I have Indian acquaintances, of all of them that I have here in the U.S., every single one of them has a degree, right? Every single one of them. The only ones that I've met that don't have a degree have been abroad. When I lived in Malaysia, like my auto mechanic, the guy that used to do repair and some of the business stuff, he didn't have a degree, right? And, a couple other people. But here in the U.S., everybody that I've met has a degree. And, specifically in my experience, all right, for those Indian households, I'm not going to say it's everywhere, but for those specific Indian households, that I was familiar with from my classmates and what have you, education is often equated with character, worthiness. It's like a family honor. A degree is more than just a piece of paper or a qualification, right? It's like a badge of being legitimate, like being, having character, those kind of things. In Indian society, of course, it's very important. If you can look at the documentaries, how they prep for college entrance exams, right? And parents really pour their savings, their time, everything they have into seeing their kids graduate, right? Not only just graduate high school, but graduate college with the right degree. They want that MD, PhD, BS, whatever it is that they're going for, right? You're only as good as your academic accomplishment in many of these societies that value education, right? But there's a psychological fallout, of course, because you could see it. What is it they call it? When they do this kind of thing, I think it's called imposter accommodation. And that's really where individuals, they internalize, right, the expectations of the family culture. And that's when it's similar to Tallarico, right, where they have to fabricate or exaggerate accomplishments in order to be seen as worthy. It's something psychological, guys. Happens to all of them. This guy's an engineer. Carl Jobs is a journalist. Tallarico was the first person that worked on a Sega game or something like that, whatever he's claiming. The shame of failing, by traditional metrics, overpowers pride or anything else they feel. Right? And at least in this case, with Mutahar, despite having wealth, fame, influence, everything you could have in a non-traditional type career, or non-traditional, at least for, in the eyes of his culture, I'm sure he feels unworthy because that's the way he acts. It's like he's if your dad is a doctor, your mom's a microbiologist, and what are you? You're a guy that talks shit on the internet. That's exactly who you are. So you put on yourself the title of engineer, and it's like a crutch, right? And really, who are you deceiving? Right? He's not deceiving anybody. He's not fooling himself, but it's like a crutch to seem, to have more self-worth, at least in the eyes of the people that he grew up around, right? Because that's why you tell the lie, right? In family systems where they're driven like that, I'm sure that there was some sort of conditional approval, right? Because they want you to become something, whatever it is, MD, engineer, whatever, right? The praise is tied to milestones. If you've been around Hispanics, and especially the meme of Hispanic, men, how moms treat their sons, they're coddled from the beginning. You don't have to do anything, right? Your mom treats you like a king, even if you work at UPS, as long as you're working, as long as you go to work every day. You can work at Jiffy Lube, you can work in a factory, you can do construction, it doesn't matter. As long as you're showing up to work every day, that's what they're proud of, regardless of what you choose to do for work. Now, this is very different from the type of societies that some Asian cultures have, like, say China or India, right? Dropping out of college, even for a legitimate reason, right, or a rewarding one, that triggers other people making you feel like you're not enough, and maybe the person themselves. And it's probably so with Mutahar. That would be my guess, because a false claim of being an engineer isn't necessarily about manipulating other people, probably the sponsors, because I don't think his audience would have cared, right? I think people that like his kind of content, do you care who's talking smack on the other end of YouTube? Most people don't. Right? It really is about personality and talent and his editing skills, whatever it is. But I think that Mutahar's cultural background, combined with his visibility and his public visibility of his parents' professions, it could produce a lot of, achievement pressure. Right? His success is always measured against the family tradition, right? Those markers of education, regardless of whatever growth he has, right? Because you could say whatever you want to say. This guy, has been successful, right? And that's why I think, right, this is just my humble opinion, because, this is a kind of culture where children are taught, and it's not the only one, right? Children are taught that respect comes from degrees. It's not from creative expression like we do here in the US, or from entrepreneurship, or your emotional intelligence. No, no, no. In the US, whatever you want to say about the US, in this case, we have a much broader definition of success, right? Because, I would say, given his career, and I think most of you out there who enjoy watching YouTube can acknowledge that he has had a successful YouTube career, right? But that is a broader definition that we have here in the West. But it's not for him, right? It's not for him. It doesn't matter what he say, because there's no reason to lie about this stuff. There really isn't, right? It would have made no difference, right? I remember when I was wearing my gown, when I was walking, the comments were like, they weren't cheering me up. Like, oh, dude, you look stupid. Pendejo. Those were the cheers I was getting, and jabs from my cousins, all in good faith, right? All tongue-in-cheek kind of stuff, but there's no pressure there. If I would have never gotten a degree, it wouldn't have been pressure for me. And I would say for most Americans, it's the same way, because what is it, like 30%, 33% of Americans actually have a degree? The rest don't. So we don't have the same drivers. But of that 30% that have degrees and master's degrees and everything else, what percentage do you think is of Indian descent, for example? How many are of Asian descent, as opposed to, Hispanics? Right? I'm sure there's a huge gap. I haven't even read the numbers, but I'm sure there's a huge gap. So growing up, we don't have the same kind of pressures that he did. But obviously, this is trauma for this guy. And this is going to haunt him. Is he going to come back? I don't know. I don't know. I have no idea. He's been in hiding now for a while, and we're going to keep on milking, because there's so much, so much other crap that he did. But I think that's why he did it. I think it was this legacy of his parents, right? Because success wasn't enough. Being a millionaire is not enough, right? But it's the psychology behind the credential lies in a high-pressure family like that. I think that is what got to him, because it's been 10 years and he's been telling the same tales. All right, humans, I will catch you on the next one. Take care.